It was in 2021. Have you ever been detained by people in black balaclavas at the protests? They don't introduce themselves, they beat you and tangle you. Are you ready to defend your rights under such conditions? That person in the video was me. The people making the arrest are the representative of Federal Security Service. During the arrest, these individuals, without identification, systematically hit me in the body. It happened so that on that day, another demonstrator distracted these officers by pushing one of them while I was being detained. They ran after him, allowing the crowd to free me. If he hadn't done this, I would not be standing before you that day, but would be in Russian prison. As you see, in Russia we always protested peacefully. Even when some individuals detained and started beating a demonstrator, me, none of the protesters interfered. Journalists surrounded the arresting officers only when they realized absolute lawlessness of what was happening. Кратко резюме на русском. Вы сами увидели видео, вам все в принципе было понятно. Задерживали люди без опознавательных знаков. В принципе, вначале я, когда крикнули «хватай меня», я оказал некоторое сопротивление, дальше сопротивления не оказывал, меня отбила толпа. В этот день, это было 31 января 2021 года, отбили еще одного человека, всего двух отбили в этот день. Тот человек, которого отбили вторым, получил срок 6 лет. Мне удалось не получить срок. Соответственно, испанцам я рассказал просто общую канву всего. In contrast, the security forces enjoy their power. They enjoy their right to cover their faces with balaclavas so that no one will know they are causing mayhem. These security forces support Putin. They have been brainwashed by Russian propaganda. Russian law enforcement agencies recruit people not based on their merits, but on their loyalty to the authorities. Promotions within this structure are possible only with personal loyalty to the boss, and the boss must be loyal to their boss, and so on, up to the Putin. But it wasn't always like this. There was a brief period of freedom in Russian history when people were not afraid to come out and defend their rights, when people were not beaten at demonstrations, when there were dozens and hundreds of independent media in the country, when elections at all levels of power were relatively fair. So what happened? Why did Russia slide back into the dictatorship? And the most important question I always hear from the Europeans: why don't Russians come out and overthrow Putin? Краткое резюме. Как мы видим, всегда российские силовики наслаждались тем, как они бьют мирных людей. Силовики всегда отбирались по принципу обратной селекции, личной лояльности своему боссу. Босс должен быть лоялен своему боссу, и так до Путина. Но так было не всегда. Был короткий период в истории нашей страны, когда у нас была свобода, у нас была свободная судебная система, у нас были относительно свободные, относительно честные выборы на всех уровнях власти. Ну и, соответственно, вопросы. Почему так случилось? Почему Россия скатилась обратно в диктатуру? И самый важный вопрос для европейцев: почему русские не выйдут и не свергнут в конце концов Путина? I will start with the last question. I would like to answer why Russians still haven't overthrown Putin. Have you ever heard of the game Russian roulette? It seems to me that the phrase Russian roulette, known worldwide, has lost its meaning for most people today. No one can say no one can say what exactly this expression means anymore. But I will tell you. At the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, there was a golden youth in Russia. They youth who had lots of opportunities, who enjoyed their life, and the whole world was at their feet. There were not as many entertainment options that provoke an adrenaline rush back then. And so the golden youth invented this game. After another drinking bout, they would take a revolver, insert one bullet in it, spin the cylinder, hold the revolver to their back, and if they are lucky, they stayed alive. The chance of shooting oneself in the head was nearly 16%. And then the revolver was passed to around the circle of friends. I mean, golden youth. An adrenaline pumping activity, isn't it so? Times have changed since then. Russian roulette is no longer popular. Times have become peaceful and the value of human life has increased. But starting 2012, in Russia the situation with protecting one's rights have become such that every time you go out to protest against the authorities, you could be imprisoned for 15 to 30 days, likely resulting in losing your job. Or more rarely, you can be sentenced up to 8 years. For up to 8 years. Imagine that every time I went out to defend my rights, I expected to be arrested. In my backpack, I carried documents, warm clothes, and water to help me until my lawyer could see me. I always dressed very warmly because security forces in Russia often used cold torture, making you sit for hours in an unheated bus when it is minus 10 degrees outside. Please, don't think that you could be imprisoned only if you did something. You could be jailed for up to 30 days without any reason. Without any reason. You could be imprisoned for years for holding a sign, or if you have if you throw a plastic cap into the police when they were already beating you with batons. The risk of losing your job due to the detention was no more than 1%. The risk of being imprisoned for years was no more than 1 in 1,000. But this was the new Russian rule. Over 100 years, it has changed significantly. Now you don't get your head blown off right away, but and you can survive in prison. But you may not. You may not too. This is how the authorities killed Alexei Navalny, Russia's main opposition figure, in prison. Going in prison was commonplace if you participated in protests in Russia. And now I have a question for you. Would you risk protesting against Putin for 10 years if you knew that every time you could be imprisoned, if you knew you could be jailed? На самом деле в этом слайде я провожу сравнение того, как мы выходим на митинги с русской рулеткой. Русская рулетка стала значительно гуманнее за последние 100 лет. Теперь тебе не сразу сносит голову. И вероятность того, что ты потеряешь работу или сядешь в тюрьму, составляет не 16%, а всего лишь 1% или 0,01. И необходимо на самом деле, каждый из нас, когда выходил на митинги, он принимал на себя эти риски. И каждый из нас думал о том, что его выход может привести к аресту на 15, от 7 до 30 суток. Или же тоже шанс всего 1 из 1000, он мог привести к долгому тюремному заключению. Чем дальше шло время, тем больше была вероятность того, что вы сядете уже надолго. Okay. Excuse me, there is no picture. It was there. Before you stands a person who protested for 10 years, a person who was not afraid. There was 2-3 major protests in Russia each year, but over these years I persuaded almost 60 my acquaintances to join the protests. Do you know how many of them came to a protest twice? I will tell you. 5 people. 5 people of 60. And none, except me, came 3 times. And I was there dozens of times. The fear of being beaten or imprisoned paralyzes people. People go out to protest, overcoming their fear, and nothing changes. In Europe, the government sometimes listens to the people during major demonstrations. In Russia, the response to the protest is always a massive baton, blow to the head. Today in Europe, I'm constantly asked why Russians don't rise against Putin now, even after the war started. I advise that the risks have changed. Today, if you are in Russia, and even just say another person that you do not support war, and they report about that to the police, you could be imprisoned for discrediting the Russian army. There was a case in Russia. A 13-year-old girl in a school art class drew a picture. She depicted a woman standing by the Ukrainian flag, shielding a child from rockets which were flying from the Russian side. The girl's father was imprisoned for that reason. The girl was separated from her parent and handed over to Child Protective Services. Can you imagine being imprisoned for your child's drawing or for your expressed opinion? Or another case, here was a picture of a man standing with a blank white sheet of paper, of a girl, excuse me. At the beginning of the war, a person took a blank white sheet of paper, just like this, went out onto a busy street and stood in a solar picket. I repeat, the sheet was blank. She was detained. Коллеги из России, значит, я надеюсь, что вы прошлую часть поняли того, что я сказал. Как мы знаем, что в России иногда протесты достигают своей цели, но единственная цель, которую мы достигли за все время протеста в России, это была дубинка по голове. И сегодня в Европе нас постоянно спрашивают, почему россияне не выходят сейчас, уже во время войны. Отвечать нужно то, что риски за это время существенно повысились. И сегодня не только выход на сам митинг, но и обсуждение каких-то проблем в кругу не совсем доверенных лиц может привести к вашему задержанию за дискредитацию армии. Рассказал про случай 13-летней девушки, которая нарисовала в школе картинку, как ее мать, одетая в одежду цвета украинского флага, защищает ее от ракет, летящих со стороны России. За это ее отца посадили на 2 года, он еще не вышел. Значит, также рассказал про второй случай, но там было не 2-летний срок, а, по-моему, в одном случае 15 суток, в другом случае просто штраф за выход с белым листом бумаги. Ростовский блогер, кажется, в Ярославле вышла она, вот, и один человек на Красной площади выходил еще. И еще были случаи, я там, когда начал смотреть, там очень много случаев таких было выходов с белым листом. Так, the next slide. But how did it come to this? Who allowed Putin to gain such power that he can beat people and imprison them with impunity? Of course, one can argue that it is the Russian society fault for allowing such development. But let's look at it from another perspective. Imagine that your country has a very skilled dictator. The dictator operates on the principle of divide and rule. First, he exiled one oligarch from the country who was universally disliked. He seized these oligarchs' assets and distributed them among his friends. The TV channel that belonged to this oligarch was handed over to a state-controlled company. Another oligarch was forced to leave the country under the threat of criminal prosecution. His TV channel was also handed to a state-controlled company. Nobody likes oligarchs. Is it so? Putin imprisoned another oligarch who dared to openly oppose him. These oligarchs financed political parties, both pro-government and opposition parties. Putin seized his assets and installed his friend to manage these assets. All this event occurred between 2000 and 2003, and thus the average Russian no longer has had access to free media. Freedom of speech was the first thing Putin destroyed. And then, on Putin's birthday, on the birthday of his close relatives, amazing news could happen. Suddenly, in 2007, on Putin's birthday, one of Russia's well-known journalists who criticized him and Ramzan Kadyrov was killed. His biggest opposition politician, Boris Nemtsov, was also killed. He was killed right on the beach near the Kremlin. I don't know what holiday Putin got such a gift for. They say it was the birthday of one of his classified sons. Most Russians didn't even know about this journalist or this politician. Most Russians. Under a dictatorship, you no longer have normal access to information. In a dictatorship, you have to pay either significant sums to get such information, or spend time searching for and analyzing such information. Then Putin gradually cancelled elections in the regions, destroyed the right to freedom of assembly, and killed and imprisoned all his critics. People from the regions who criticized the government couldn't find work. Putin destroyed the judicial system. The systems of checks and balances was finally destroyed in Russia. Короткое резюме на русском языке. Ну как же так получилось у нас в стране? В период 2000 по 2003 год Путин сначала отобрал канал у Гусинского, затем отобрал канал у Березовского, забрал одновременно его активы и распределил их между друзьями. Затем в 2003 году произошло задержание Ходорковского, и на его активы был поставлен хороший друг Путина Сечин, который до сих пор управляет Роснефтью. И все эти события случились прямо в начале правления Путина. У простых россиян, которые на тот момент не имели доступа к интернету, напомню, у нас к 2012 году у россиян, только у 40% россиян был доступ к интернету. Если говорить от 2000 по 2005 год, доступа к интернету у россиян не было. Ну, к примеру, у меня он появился в 2008 году. И Путин внезапно стал получать после таких вот пертурбаций со СМИ внезапные подарки. На его день рождения в 2007 году была убита Политковская. На предполагаемый день рождения одного из его засекреченных сыновей был убит Борис Немцов. И на самом деле вот россияне, ну, из глубинки, они же, большинство из них совершенно точно не знают, кто такая Анна Политковская. Кто-то из них помнит, кто такой Борис Немцов, когда он работал, кто такой был Борис Немцов, когда он работал в правительстве, но о его оппозиционной деятельности знал действительно не так много россиян из глубинки. И в условиях диктатуры действительно люди не имеют хорошего доступа к информации, поэтому диктатура творит все, что она хочет. Путин постепенно отменил выборы в регионах, уничтожил судебную власть и посадил всех, кто его критиковал. Таким образом была разрушена система сдержек и противовесов в России. I ask you to believe me. No Russian ever advocated for being deprived of access to information. No Russian ever advocated for being forbidden to participate in protests. I never saw a Russian who, before the war with Ukraine started, called for an attack on Kiev. But most Russians knew nothing about all of this. And in the media they couldn't read about, and in the media they could read about Putin's successes. They could read about the party's successes. I mean the party United Russia. Let's not forget that the internet appeared in most Russian homes only after 2012. In this case, Russians became ordinary victims of dictator. And they will remain victims until the dictator weakens or make several mistakes. You never blame victims of violence for their actions, but somehow it is considered normal to blame the population of the countries with dictatorships for establishing this dictatorship. That they are to blame for not overthrowing the dictatorship. That they are to blame for depriving themselves of media freedom, freedom of assembly, the right to run for office or to be elected. Короткое резюме для россиян. Нельзя винить жертву в том, что она жертва. Нельзя винить людей в том, что они как-то установили сами диктатуру. Я не встречал ни одного россиянина, который бы просил, чтобы у него забрали право голоса, который бы просил, чтобы у него отобрали свободные СМИ, который бы просил, чтобы у него забрали право свободно и мирно собираться на площадях. Я не видел ни одного россиянина до войны, который бы призывал, лично мне не был знаком, который бы призывал штурмовать Киев. Поэтому мне кажется, что обвинения в адрес россиян несколько преувеличены, хотя об их ответственности мы поговорим чуть позже. But in Russia, Russians did not have access to information about Putin's atrocities. From the inside, it was not visible how the dictatorship was forming. Nevertheless, in Europe and in the USA, there was understanding from the beginning that a dictatorship was being established in Russia. European media covered the issue from the start that Putin took away TV channels from oligarchs and filled them with propaganda. In 2007, Putin gave his famous Munich speech, in which he directly stated his desire to participate in the redistribution of the world. He explicitly said that he would not fight for European values. He made it clear that he would establish a dictatorship in Russia that would not protect citizens' rights and freedoms. He sent a message that Russia has its own special past. And do you know who helped Putin subdue the Russian citizens who still aspired to freedom? I will tell you. European countries helped Putin establish a dictatorship. They saw nothing wrong with him depriving his citizens of basic political rights. They didn't care about the murder of Russian opposition activists. European presidents and chancellors financed Putin and his regime. They bought oil and gas from him. They were happy when Putin's friends built villas at the best resorts in Spain, France, Switzerland and Italy. But the worst thing is that during protests in Russia and Belarus, law enforcement officers had and used weapons manufactured by Remington and Mossberg, the USA, Fabam and Benene from Italy, 6 Hours Switzerland, Germany, joint company, and Glock Austria. That is, European countries knew for many years that Putin was a dictator, but continued to supply him with tools for suppressing protests. And today, many European politicians accuse Russians of not successfully resisting the electroshocks, batons, and water cannons they supplied to Russia. Well, I give up. I recognize that the Europeans make excellent pieces of equipment for breaking up rallies. But I draw your attention to the fact that these samples are supplied to dictators. Короткое резюме. Здесь я обращаю внимание на то, что европейские режимы не находили ничего странного в том, чтобы сотрудничать с Путиным после Мюнхенской речи 2007 года, когда он открыто заявил о своем пути, когда он сказал о том, что ему не по пути с европейскими ценностями, что он будет настраивать свой особый путь, что Россию ждет какой поворот на восток, кажется, когда прозвучала фраза. И то, что он собирался разрушить какой-то, как он видел, однополярный мир и сделать его многополярным. Уже тогда для европейцев все было понятно, но в 2010 году мы с вами помним, как, в 2010, кажется, году на параде в Москве собрались многие лидеры западных стран, они поддерживали его. Они поддерживали его после присоединения Крыма, они покупали у него оружие, они сами поставляли оружие в Россию. И самое интересное, что они поставляли средства для разгона митингов, то есть из Италии, из Франции, из Германии, из Австрии было оборудование, которое позволяло подавлять протесты, и это оборудование поставлялось довольно длительное время. Так, я надеюсь, нормально. Excuse me. Blaming the victim for being a victim is of course unacceptable. But at the same time, I cannot say that the Russian population bears no responsibility for the establishment of Putin's dictatorship. And here's why. Putin became president in 2000. Before that, the country had enormous problems. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, people struggled to find food. People lived in poverty and blamed the authorities for it. And the authorities simply couldn't do anything. Just after the collapse of the USSR, which had no capitalism at all, people didn't know how to manage their money. They blamed the authorities for all their problems. It must be acknowledged that the authorities made many mistakes in the process of reforms in the 90s. People faced deceit in a capitalist state, and there was rampant banditry in the country. Короткое резюме. Перед тем, как Путин стал президентом, мы все с вами помним, что было в 90-х. Все-таки у нас большое количество населения сталкивалось с существенной бедностью. Был все-таки разгул бандитизма в стране. И люди, когда они сталкивались с такими сложностями, удивительно, но в то время они больше винили власти в том, что случилось, чем в то время, как там, я скажу, в сайте. When Putin came to power, the country experienced an increase in dollar inflow from the oil and gas Russia sold to Europe and other countries. The reforms implemented after the collapse of the Soviet Union, before Putin came to power, began to work fully and bring positive economic results only in early 2000s. Russians experienced a rapid increase in their own well-being. Yes, compared to European countries, the population remained poor. But in just 5 years, the country eliminated the most acute poverty. When the people's well-being improved, instead of becoming more interested in politics, they calmed down. Their primary needs for food and shelter were addressed. They thought that Putin was a great president who solved their problem. In reality, it was a mere coincidence. Regarding such Russians, I often hear the phrase, they sold their rights and freedoms for a full fridge in their kitchen. Perhaps if I had not been so passionate about politics, if I had starved myself, I would have understood these people. But from my position, I can't understand them. In the school curriculum, we study Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As you can see, social needs, including political engagement, are in the third place. And I believe that this is Maslow's mistakes. My conviction is that if you don't fulfill your social need to engage in politics, your state will eventually deprive you even of the opportunity to satisfy your psychological and safety needs. In early 2000s, people had the opportunity to read independent media, but no one was interested. Everyone lived their lives, enjoyed themselves after hard times. There was an unspoken agreement between the state and society. Society does not get involved in politics, but it was too late. The state had prepared for 12 years to defend the borders of dictatorship. It was too late to protest. It was too late to come out. My parent generation proved incapable of defending democracy. They failed to understand that the gradual deprivation of right would lead to establishment of a new dictatorship. Короткое резюме, свой большой. Когда Путин пришел к власти, население все-таки столкнулось с увеличением с уровня своего благосостояния. Был заключен негласный контракт между обществом и государством, который гласил: вы не лезете в политику и наслаждаетесь вашей жизнью, а мы не лезем в вашу душу. И действительно, когда население получило вот этот некоторый уровень благосостояния, вместо того, чтобы начать больше интересоваться политикой, они стали интересоваться ее меньше. Это парадокс России. И о таких людях в России часто говорят, что они продали свои права и свободы за холодильник, за наполненный холодильник. И с этим можно частично согласиться. Мы все в школе изучаем пирамиду Маслоу. В этой пирамиде наши социальные потребности находятся на 3-м уровне. И мне кажется, в этом ошибка Маслоу. Потому что если ты не удовлетворяешь свои социальные потребности путем вовлечения в политику, то рано или поздно эта политика придет к тебе домой. И она не позволит тебе удовлетворить свои базовые потребности в безопасности и твои психологические потребности. Поэтому очень важно вовлекаться в политику всегда. В начале 2000-х у населения была возможность читать независимые медиа, но никого это не интересовало. Все жили своей жизнью, наслаждались собой. И все это длилось ровно до тех пор, пока средний класс внезапно не проснулся спустя 12 лет и не попробовал отстоять свои права. Но было уже поздно. Государство уже было готово, оно ждало этих выступлений. Поэтому нас разгромили за год, меньше, чем за год. Самый крупный протест был на Болотной в декабре. Когда был в мае протест, они были уже меньше, но тогда уже были уголовные дела. Потом было ужесточение законодательства, очередная отмена, точнее частичный возврат губернаторских выборов, а потом их отмена, просто в качестве того, что собаки кость бросили. Но в целом мы проиграли эту битву уже тогда. At the beginning of the lecture, I said that I would answer the question of where dictatorship begins. I thought long and hard about this question. And in my opinion, dictatorship begins with the words, I'm not interested in politics. Every person who says this must understand that one day the critical mass of people who say this will become so large that politics will come to their home. And this politics will have the face of a dictator. Today, I see this problem in Europe. Clip linking, reels on Instagram, generate clip consumption of news. People learn about the news for 1 minute per day. Populist politicians who speak to people in slogans are on the rise again around the world. People don't need any explanation again. And I see that Spain and other European countries are at the same stage as Russia was in the early 2000s. Therefore, I urge you to take an interest in politics. I urge you to participate actively in it. I urge you not to sell your country for pleasures. I urge you never to say the phrase, I'm not interested in politics. Thank you for your attention.